A very good evening and welcome to all the participants to this 46th Wise Use Interactive Webinar Series program called Leadership Conversations. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to share with you that so far we have conducted 45 plus leadership conversations uninterrupted every Friday at 7:30 p.m. With support from all of you, we've been able to bring in very good leaders, distinguished in their own right, from across diverse fields, from technology, engineering, education, science, philosophy, art, culture, social work, so on and so forth. And today we have yet another distinguished leader, Ms. Sirisha Voruganti. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Ms. Sirisha. Welcome, ma'am. Good evening to you. We are extremely delighted today that this ongoing series is supported, encouraged, and endorsed by leaders like you, ma'am. And your presence will definitely add a lot of value to our participants who are directly joining today and many more who are actually going to watch on Facebook Live and subsequently from our archives. We actually conduct what is called summaries of each of these conversations, and we publish it on the archives apart from the actual video recording. And it is a very interesting and important learning tool for all of us, whoever have missed in the past, and it is likely that due to some work pressure, they're going to miss certain events. So this is a very integral part of our learning process as well. I have learned quite a bit. My colleagues and all the team members have learned quite a bit here. Let me also introduce and welcome Professor R. Prasad. He is the architect of the online MBA program.
Good evening, ma'am.
Hi, Prasad.
He's the mentor and director for the online MBA program. He's the co-moderator today. Without much ado, I will do a brief introduction and then I'll share my screen first. I hope you all can see the screen. This is our guest, Ms. Sirisha Voruganti. She's going to talk about digital transformation in the financial world. The agenda is first 20 to 25 minutes. So we have this talk delivered by Ms. Sirisha, followed by 30 minutes of Q&A, moderated by Professor Prasad and I. A brief introduction. Currently, she's the managing director of JP Morgan Chase. Ms. Sirisha leads architecture, data, and digital technology for consumer and community banking (CCB) at JP Morgan Chase and is based out of India. She brings a rich experience of 30 plus years of global executive experience spanning research labs, product engineering, strategy, mergers and acquisitions, business development, and consulting across public and private sectors. She held various positions like Executive Vice President and CTO of Architecture and Shared Services for MasterCard, and she was heading MasterCard in India. She was the first group executive leader in technology for MasterCard outside of US. Prior to MasterCard, she worked for Tech Mahindra Limited as a distinguished fellow and senior vice president and head of innovation, where she was awarded the Mahindra Innovation Award 5 years in a row. This is a hugely distinguished accomplishment. Also, she received 2 National Telecom Awards, the Indian Express Group Award for Innovation, and many more. She actually started her career as a scientist with the Defense Labs. She has a master's degree in electronics and communication engineering and also holds patents in cloud-based versatile system for radiological images. She also did an executive management program from the prestigious Harvard Business School. With this brief introduction to the wonderful personality that we have this evening, I stop my screen sharing and start the session now. May I request Ms. Sirisha to begin her talk. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming once again Ms. Sirisha. Good evening, ma'am, and welcome. Please start your session.
Absolutely. Firstly, thanks very much. Very, very excited to be here as part of this particular series that you guys run. So thanks very much for having me on. And every interaction that I have of this sort, I feel personally very excited because there's a lot of food for thought with all the questions and the interactions, and personally looking forward to all of that. So, I think we should each challenge ourselves as we go through the session. The topic, as was mentioned by Sudhakar today, is about digital transformation in the financial world. And I'll give you a little bit of a background of the financial world and how large it is and what we are talking about here in terms of sheer scale, right? As far as the financial world itself is concerned, a fifth of the global economy is actually managed, within the space. It holds close to about 15% of the global workforce. So that's the magnitude of the sector itself. And many things that we do and that touch our daily lives are, pretty much connected to the financial world in some form and shape. And I'll touch upon each one of those as we go through the conversation. And JP Morgan itself, this is an old behemoth of sorts. It's existed now for about 200 years. And those of you that have heard of Thomas Alva Edison and the light bulb, JP Morgan was one of the, sponsors for Thomas Alva Edison as he went through that innovation. So that's how old, we are as an organization. And in terms of just the volumes that the firm handles, right, it is close to about $28 trillion of asset in custody that the bank has. And close to that $6 trillion of daily financial transactions, of dollar transactions that go through on a daily basis from within this bank. And close to about 50% of the US households do work with us in some form and shape, whether it is the consumer bank, whether it is the investment bank, the asset wealth management piece, or the commercial bank. So that's huge. And in terms of just the digital customers, we're talking about close to 54 million customers that are using our digital channels, whether it is the online or the mobile channels. And that number has actually gone up. I mean, COVID has accentuated some of that. It's gone up close to about 30% in the last 2 years. I mean, so earlier was really an in-branch experience that was there. And a lot of innovation was pushed because of COVID, and especially on the digital and the web channels. And the other things that JP Morgan is really associated with, in addition to sponsoring some of the innovation that I spoke about, whether it was the first ATM that was installed, JP Morgan was pretty much one of those leaders there, as well as for many of these online and mobile channels where we definitely are and have been the first. And transformation, the topic for today, many of us have seen this in forms and shape. And it's not just for one sector alone, right? I think many aspects have led to innovation of sorts and the newer experiences that each of you would like to have. And the biggest challenge for us is the millennial and the Gen Z customers that we have, which is all of you, and the sort of convenience and experiences that you like, and what we need to push into this, right? So the word transformation, I think, really needs to be underlined, because it's really about how experiences have changed over time. Gone are the days when you would probably write an inland letter or a card home, right? And then you have the days of email. Move to WhatsApp, and then Snapchat, now Instagram, everything. I mean, and how have things changed? It's really about sharing your experiences and sharing everything that's happening in your personal life, real time or near real time. And that's the ask. Now, if the ask is, you might think it's a simplistic ask of near real time, everything that you want to have. But there is a lot of processing at the back end that needs to happen to ensure that this simplistic experience is actually provided to customers, right? So that's the transformation that has happened in the expectations of the consumer. Now, the same thing has happened with the card, right? Gone are the days when, you would take your card to a grocery and swipe it. And he would have those machines where he swiped it manually. He gave you a copy of it. He had a copy of it, of the transaction. He would submit it to the bank. It would take a couple of days before, the transaction got authenticated by the bank. That's when the merchant got, his whatever was due to him. And then there was a transaction that went through your bank account at the back end. So it took quite a few days. Today, that is not an acceptable pattern at all for customers and consumers, right? We're really talking about, as I said, real-time everything. So even if you want to go into the store and have a co-branded card, you would want the, earlier you would have to write down a form, write out a form, submit it, takes a few days for you to get the card, and then, you then go use that card. But today it's not like that. You want to digitally, have a virtual form filled out, submit it. You want to get the card near real time. You want to get points near real time. You want to be able to use those points near real time. So that's the sort of change in experience, that customers and consumers are talking about. Now, to manage all of this for just us, in the bank, we have close to about 6,000 plus applications that we're dealing with, and close to 450 petabytes of data. And keep that in mind, 450 petabytes. That's a lot of data. 1 petabyte itself is a lot of data. And 450 is, I've said this in some other forum, it's pretty much 65 trips to and back from the moon. And that's the amount of data that you're actually dealing with because of the sort of personalization services and the sort of experiences that you want to provide our customers are expecting and asking for, right? Now, with that in mind, I also talked about an ecosystem that is required. Now, each one doing their own little function, and of course, somewhere everything has to collapse or has to come together to be able to provide these services, whether it is the fintechs, and where huge amount of investments are still coming in. And then you have the telecom providers. You have the banks or the guys that need to complete the transaction. So there are multiple, and the device makers who need to make all of this possible on those devices. And I'm just not talking about mobile devices, right? In the day of connected commerce, you want to probably do, have a financial transaction done from your refrigerator. You want a financial transaction done from within your car or wherever. So the devices could be many of these. And so for anything as simplistic as an experience, there are many people involved in the process. And that is the sort of transformation that we're seeing. And to provide any small experience, it takes a lot at the back end. So some of the mega trends that I would see in banking, and I'll talk a little about those and how they would impact transformation, in the future in terms of experiences that we provide. The first one of these is touchless transactions. They're going to be more and more, and we see that in India too. And once you provide an experience to customers, they always ask for more, right? You would have seen this at toll booths where you have this, the FASTag that's now come in, and it has actually reduced. If you accumulate the amount of time saved, it's substantial. So that's a small experience of a touchless payment that is happening. Similarly, there are many other experiences that customers would ask for, a very non-intrusive payment experiences. So we have things like blink and pay, you have facial recognition and, to make a payment transaction. So there are many of these that are coming in. Now, though they have a lot of advantages in terms of non-intrusiveness and many other aspects, there is a huge amount of fraud that we deal with in the banking segment, right? And as technology is evolving, people writing anti-patterns and specializing in algorithms that are writing anti-patterns too are increasing, right? So for us, it's a huge challenge. It's a big mathematical problem to work out risk models to kind of really, see how we could counter threats. And in the last 2 years of COVID, the threat has actually gone up 600 times, 600% up. Guys who are actually hitting our network and so on, right? And the sort of fraud too has increased in terms of, earlier you could recognize fraud through a certain pattern of transactions that happened. But lately, they would stay dormant in your network and it becomes extremely difficult to find, some of these fraudsters within your system. The other thing also, and when I talked experiences and when I talk integration with some of these, third-party applications and so on, and, we're very, very high and on risk and control because you do not want to expose, you're dealing with a lot of cash, and you do not want to expose your network to third-party and fourth-party risk because of something because data hubs are happening at various levels, right? And it could be a simple discounted offer that a vendor is making, and then that goes through the network. There is a data exchange, but you don't know where that data is actually going. So there is a lot that is, that's happening around all of that. So the seconds that that I would call out here, and the first one being touchless transactions, the second is really about, doubling down on insights and personalization, again, to do a lot with data, to provide an experience that I, as a consumer, would like to see. I'd like the bank to know my transaction patterns and then provide me offers that would suit the sort of money that I have. And help maximizing, my experience with the bank, as well as to enhance my own saving. So that's going to increase, and we believe that's going to be a big mega trend as we go forward with the segment. The other thing that I talked about is near real-time everything. We'd like everything pretty much happening in real time. And that exercise is only going to probably increase with additional experiences that consumers would like to see, right? The other thing is self-service as a norm. And now we hear about technologies like metaverse, for instance, right? So when I say self-service, there were a couple of use cases that we were looking at some point in time before metaverse became as big as it is now, about providing a banking experience to the senior citizens, where we said we should take the bank to the senior citizens and not them coming into the branch, right? So you wear your AR/VR glasses, and then you're able to get an experience of going to the branch and talking to somebody at the branch. So I believe that's only going to increase in the coming years, and we'd see more and more of self-service in various forms and shapes. Or I talked about one particular use case, but that's going to be more and more of that. And we would also, there'd be changes in business models. There'd be more and more players coming, the merchants, the customers, and so on. So there would be changes to the service delivery models that we have, and there's going to be a lot of innovation that I believe we'll see in that, right? The other thing, I mean, many of you all of you are MBA students, so you do understand time to market and how that is so important, right? And when I say time to market, that's where a lot of back-end stuff does come in terms of having architected systems, right? Because if you don't get a particular solution to market, you lose a market window and you lose the opportunity. It's an extremely competitive market space. And if you do not bring in a new solution at a point in time, you've lost that huge opportunity, right? And there's somebody else that's out there to pick it up. So it's extremely important. That's the reason, and that ties into many of the things. How you've architected the solutions? Have you built autonomous solutions? Have you tested them enough? Are you able to push it to the market the first time? And will it be, is it going to be erroneous? Is it going to function the way it should? And so on and so forth. So it's extremely important that many aspects at the back end work right as you're pushing solutions through. And that's where all our focus around architecture as a service, infrastructure as a service. So again, you're not using expensive storage space. You're kind of using storage on the go in terms of using more and more of that, because it's all about cost, right? So there are 3 or 4 watchwords that we have: faster, quicker, better, and at lower cost. And these, for each of them, have huge connotations as you're trying to push solutions to the market on time. And so that's another big one in terms of how have we built the services? Are they microservices? Are they autonomous enough? Are you able to test them? Are they resilient enough? Do you have backup mechanisms and fallback mechanisms in case there is an error? And so on and so forth. So all of them are extremely important for you to think of, as you are rolling out solutions to the market. And so architecture and how you organize your data and so on becomes important. So for everything big that we have, it's not just a system architect. Nowadays, we also have a data architect that sits with the team and sees the sort of data hubs that happen at the back end for some of these systems. So that becomes, extremely important. And as I said, data, it's not easy. It's that, how the data mesh works at the back end, how you are ingesting data, how you're storing data, how you're archiving data, how you're able to pull the hot and warm data as you kind of, need to provide experiences, as well as, there is a lot of regulatory reporting and things like that we have on the data. So, how do you manage that? So data and managing that aspect and architecture really go hand in hand as you're building solutions. So these are some of the big ones, and fintechs are going to continue to play big on some of the sectors like artificial intelligence. It's been there for a while, and it's going to continue with newer use cases. Because AI, we see AI is used on personalization or on loyalty, on the risk and fraud sector. We also see it in our production management. We see it on our servicing. So there are many use cases that we're working on, and we have our own platform on which we build. So AI is going to, again, from a tech trend and fintech standpoint, that's going to be a space that will continue to grow. Peer-to-peer lending, I mean, we've seen a lot of that in India during demonetization. So we believe that's going to be a sector and segment that's going to grow, and we're continuing. We're actually looking at that big. Crowdfunding, of course, we've seen some of that. A lot of the startups do look at that, and we have a platform within where we crowdfund solutions across business groups as well, where one group is not willing to fund all of it. We have an internal crowdfunding platform, but this is way bigger in terms of, cross-border payments or whatever it is, but it's really looking at crowdfunding some of the fintech sectors and so on. Digital payments, that is going to continue to see a lot of innovation in the future. And robo-advisors, right? So we have and use them in our servicing. So if you call the bank, it's actually a robo that answers at the other end. But there is going to be a lot more than just answering a call, right? It also will have to do a voice biometric and identify you for that customer, of the bank and so on. So there's a lot of innovation, as you can see. The transformation is at multiple levels, right? It is at an architecture level, it's at a data level, it's at the infrastructure on which everything is sitting. So we have, there's the huge move to cloud, which also facilitates a lot of innovation. A lot of people can more quickly come together. But again, when you're talking finances, it's extremely important for you to be very careful as you move to the cloud. But we have, a big initiative and looking at what's called a hybrid cloud, where we have an on-prem, data management, and we have as well as use the cloud for some of our, solutions where there's not too much of what we call highly confidential data. That's something that's happening, and we continue to invest in all of that. Now, why is it it's important for all of us, right, to do this? The bank invests close to that $12 billion in technology investments. And that's a big deal, right? And all of that can't just be used for running the engine, which is just providing status quo services to customers. What we try to do in all of this, and because of the way markets are moving, because of the competition that we have, because of fintechs coming and occupying many of these spaces, we need to innovate on a regular basis, improve our own solutions, and come up with better and better solutions, or partner up with some of these firms that have these niche pockets. So, and for that, it's important for us to be able to run the engine more efficiently. And that's where I talked about, the microservices-based architecture, autonomous solutions, investments on, all the robotic process automation, etc., that we need to have, where you're quickly able to build solutions and test them, and you're able to push them out to market rather quickly and have them as highly resilient solutions. And you have the dollar to invest into innovation, and that's a constant challenge that we work on. Definitely, big investments that we've made in the last couple of years, about 9 acquisitions in various sectors, and about close to about 263 companies that we've actually invested in. What does that signify? It just signifies that, you know, nobody, you can't stay cush on your laurels. It's important for you to be moving with some of the trends in the market to be able to sustain and to be able to maintain your leadership position, you know, in this highly competitive world. So that is something that, you know, we as a firm are constantly working on. And so, yeah, so when I talk about the transformation, it's really about these changes and shift that we're seeing in the way people perceive and the way people want to, you know, use and transact. And we've seen a lot of that in India. We're hearing today about many other, and when I talk innovation, you must have recently read some of the notes that have come out in JP Morgan in terms of us investing in technologies like metaverse, investing in technologies like Bitcoin and, you know, blockchain, the cryptocurrencies, then as well as the first digital bank that we've set up in the UK and so on. It really talks about us wanting to stay ahead of the curve and, you know, looking at various regions and geographies to make ourselves relevant. Again, you know, and go outside of North America in a big way, right? So we're looking at China as another market of extreme interest to us. What are the opportunities that the financial sector has? I talked about, you know, all the mega trends and everything that's good and what we need to look at from that segment standpoint. But there are also a few opportunities that are there, right? Whether it is for banks, for some of the card companies or whoever. We still have close to about 2 billion people that are in the unbanked and the underbanked segment. Now that is something, that's a population that you know, we constantly look at and see what we can do with respect to taking financial services to. It still remains a challenge, but that's a work in progress and what we're trying to do. In India, I think the government and the NCPI came up with, you know, some amazing solutions around UPI and BHIM as well as Aadhaar, and that has brought in a lot of the population into the financial segment, or, you know, has helped bring them into the sector. But I think that needs to happen. A lot more needs to happen globally to ensure something similar, you know, can be done at global levels. I do know there were some conversations around this in the UN, I think, where we presented our solution there, and there was a lot of discussion and debate, and it's being discussed in various banking forums across the globe. So yeah, I mean, there's just a lot that's happening in this space and segment, and with the newer experiences with what the millennials and the Gen Zs want, you know, there is much change that's happening, and all the transformation in terms of change that's happening, right, for at the back end, in terms of re-architecture, in terms of additional security enhancements, in terms of move to the cloud, and so on. There's a lot happening. So, well, that's about all I had from a content standpoint. Would love to get, you know, would love to hear your take on the sector, segment, and any other exchanges that we can have. Over to you, Sudhakar.
Thank you, ma'am. I think that is a wonderful opening remarks that you have given. And it is not just opening remarks, but it has set the context. The context is too big, actually, for a 1-hour session. And I'm sure you'll agree with me that we have to close it by 8:30 p.m. as you have indicated earlier. That is one exact 1 hour and not more than that. So in the interest of time, what I will do is I will forego my summary here, and quickly we will start the interesting question and answer session. I'm sure we have lots of questions, but we'll pick and choose some of the very relevant and interesting questions, which will actually delve little more, help us understand and discover a little more along the lines of presentation that you have made. And some pertinent points are going to be detailed, I'm sure. So what I request now is Professor Prasad to initiate the Q&A without much ado, and we will save on time and focus on most relevant questions. Over to you, Professor Prasad.
Thank you, Professor Rao. Ma'am, we've received a lot of questions. The first one is not directly related to digital transformation, but it's about you. From defense labs to where you are right now, there is a journey, and there must have been a good degree of vision and adapting to what is required. And from a viewpoint of potential entrepreneurs, intrapreneurs, or managers, how do you put insights across from your own journey into how they can craft their journeys?
Oh, absolutely. Very interesting question. Thank you for that. Well, I started my journey, as I said, 30 years ago as a scientist with the defense labs. I was very lucky to work on the Prithvi and the Nag missile, worked on the navigation and mission computing for Prithvi, and worked on the control guidance software for Nag, and worked on what's called an integrated mission computer for the LCA and so on. So it gave me a huge insight into putting systems together. And then came in this whole very, very large scale integration stuff. So I moved to the private sector where we created these, system on chip designs, right? Where you did hardware, software, co-design and things like that. Again, at each stage, just think about understanding systems and building systems, right? I think that was the big thing that happened. And then I moved to I did a couple of startups. I did about 3 startups. One was a wipe solution we sold it to Skype. There was a second one, which was an e-reader for the India market. And then a third was a low-cost phone platform for the Indian market, again, a 2,000 rupee phone. Now, each of those is a learning and experience by itself before I moved into the financial segment and sector. So I think at each stage, you never plan some of these out, but if I look at how things have panned out for me, I think each of those experiences have really helped as I now look at from the top of the house in terms of how things function, how things work, and how we can put these systems together and how we can create these large ecosystems that I talked about for solution creation, especially in things like connected commerce, right? I mean, when I worked, my Mahindra experience helped me a lot, where Anand Mahindra came up once and said, I think you must have seen it, there was $1 million contest that he announced saying, can you create a driverless car? And we said, oh, driverless car, we should be able to do that. And then he said a driverless car for the India market that actually increases the complexity of the problem 1,000 times over. But each of these experiences, the reason I'm talking about them is when we talk connected commerce today, you are able to quickly visualize and put a system together. So I think for me, every little thing that I did over the last 3 years really helps me with that sort of larger system perspective. And I think when you create and roll out solutions, it's extremely important for you to have a feel of, how it all comes together. So that's how it's helped me. And for many entrepreneurs in the room or guys who are aspiring to be entrepreneurs, I think you should definitely take that step and do it, because it's important to take risk when you're able to take risk. You might fail, out of 1,000 startups, maybe there are 2 of them that succeed. But that's fine. The whole experience is a big learning by itself. And after a certain stage today, if I have to take a risk, which is of some mega magnitude, I think I'll think 20 times because of all the responsibilities you have. But when you're younger, it's a lot more, your resiliency to failure is a lot more, I think.
Awesome, ma'am. I think, from under the system point of view to a startup where you've taken risk and delivered on it, and then moving into enterprise finance where you have to control risk with the technology. I think it's been a long gamut, and I'm sure that this gives some anchors to people who want to think ahead with respect to their core competencies.
Absolutely.
Next question, ma'am, is about your experience at JP Morgan Chase. What were the challenges that you faced in implementing digital transformation at JP Morgan Chase, and how did you address them?
Well, any transformation, right? Any change, there is a lot of resistance to change because a lot of things work as is. If you have to break down existing systems, it's a lot of work. in terms of saying, and as I said, if you're 200 years old and you kind of have a lot of patchwork done on your systems, right, as you grow. So if there are some centralized applications and you are having to build a newer customer experience, for instance, you have a new authorization service that you want to bring in, or a new wallet service that you want to bring in, you're just building it on existing systems, which are large monoliths, and the monolith starts becoming larger and larger. And then, there is this thing of saying, okay, can we build a more autonomous service? If we have to compete with the Amazons of the world or somebody, you will have to become more agile as a group, and you can't have these large monoliths. So you need to split these monoliths, right? It's extremely difficult, one, to convince people about the fact that this change is going to lead to, everything that we speak about in terms of faster, quicker, better. Because at the very beginning, it's a lot of work. There's a lot of bubble cost that's involved in it, right? Because you need to run the existing system, you need to break the monolith. And from a cost, time, resource standpoint, it's substantial. So yes, you will have to, and again, it's none of these are just technical challenges, right? For everybody in this room who could become a product manager tomorrow or who could lead a product, I think these are problems one needs to dabble around, right? Because you have a certain cost that you have for a product. You need to wisely spend that. Do you want to break the monolith? How much do you want to really do this year on year? What's your 5-year plan? You need to work on your ROI and things like that as you do this. So there is a lot of resistance. But, I think if some things have to be done in the larger interest, where you're saying in 5 years' time, the return is going to be way higher than running this monolith for 5 years. And, you dying with having to do a fix on the monolith, because there are, so many guys that need to be involved in that fix, and the cost for it is substantial. If 5 managing directors have to come and sit and solve a problem, it's huge cost to the bank, right? I mean, and you'd get your own army of people to work on things. So, I think it's very important as to how you work through such changes, and product management, I think, becomes extremely important in such cases.
I think that's extremely useful for a lot of members who belong to organizations which are may not be as big as JP Morgan's Chase, but do have legacy systems and then want to develop on that. And I think this aspect about resistance to change, yes, I think that's the central core of it that we do experience. And your insights.
Oh, you see that in children, right? I mean, you want a child who's 3 years old to make a change to his daily routine. It's hell at home. So it's not very different in organizations either.
Excellent, ma'am. I think the next question is about the space that financial institutions operate in. You have the new startups, you have very large players, JP Morgan Chase, who's adapting, and then you've got large players, say in banking, who may not be as agile, who may be slow. So how do you see this whole journey progressing for the slow players, if you take banks as an example?
So, well, over time, right, it's extremely competitive. I don't think any of the slow players will be able to survive, because, it's not just the large banks, right? I mean, the smaller ones are not able to move as agile, will get eaten by somebody. And we've seen that, right? In India, we had cities doing extremely badly. They want to bail out of the country. And many such, right? And we've seen that with mobile operators in the country as well. I mean, how many that started still exist today? Many of them have gotten eaten, right? Because you were probably not agile enough. You've probably not brought out the solutions. You've not made the right investments. We've also seen this in mobile companies. I mean, there was Nokia. If you remember a few years ago, it was Nokia everywhere, and they didn't have a 3G strategy, and Nokia was kicked out of the market, and you had Samsungs and the rest that came into the market, right? So it's extremely important. Anybody who is not agile, who is not able to innovate, who's not able to work with this competitive environment, is not going to exist. And so it's important for just survival that you kind of move, right? You can't have large run costs and not be able to, move to new infrastructures. You cannot not move to the cloud, because, your ability to push solutions is going to be way faster. All of this, right? You can't sit on legacy for too long anymore, because, it's like an old house which has these leaky electric lines. The costs are going to be huge, right? And maintaining those over a period of time is just impossible. And so guys who cannot adapt to change will over time cease to exist. And fintechs, I think, are giving each one of us a run for our money, because we either work together, or we kind of make those investments, or we otherwise we will not have that space at all.
I think you've defined the bottom line very well. It's a question of survival, and agility is absolutely essential. Cost and speed of response and quality of response are going to count. I think with this, I hand it to Professor Sudhakar Rao for the next cluster.
Thank you very much. I'm actually scared. I'm scared for the fact that we don't have enough time. And the second one I'm scared of is that will we be able to pick up the right questions? Because most of the questions seem to be as relevant. So that's my worry. But let me live through this worry and make it as interesting as possible. Ma'am, thank you very much. Just a bit of information that a large majority of the people who participate every week in these leadership conversations, they're actually working professionals and they're not our students. Majority of them are not our students. It has worked out like that. Average experience is about 6 years plus from variety of sectors. So the purpose is to create that spark among them through your discussions and practices and expertise and views and things like that. So one very interesting question, as I said, this is a little more elaborative in its requirement. What is the criticality or relevance of blockchain tools on digital transformation in financial institutions or initiatives?
Actually, it's huge, right? And that is the reason we ourselves are investing very, very big on blockchain. In fact, we have a blockchain center of excellence that we've set up, and where we're leading efforts on, distributed ledger, right? And there are solutions that we've created ourselves. Well, there's one which is called the Interbank Information Network, and a second forum. These are tools that really help industry standards, really actively looking at a number of solutions or use cases for blockchain, and to develop an in-house technology and pilot these solutions across various lines of businesses. So that's going to be very, very big, and we are betting very big on blockchain technologies ourselves. I mean, if you look at our labs, there are quite a few solutions that we've created around this. So that's where that stands. Big investments is all I can say.
Great. Ma'am, one more relevant question. I'm just stepping back to the conversation that we had in the first module. With respect to JP Morgan Chase, these digital initiatives and the transformation process, there is a gamut of activities, capabilities, and apart from that, alignments within the organization. All these are required to be done. For these in JP Morgan Chase, did you do everything in-house, or you had outsourced a few things to your partners? How did it happen? A brief overview on that.
So a lot of partners that work through this, right? For instance, if we are talking cloud, then we are a big AWS house. Work very, very closely with AWS, and we jointly working on solutions. Because one of the big problems that we had was highly classified information, and how do we put it on public cloud, right? And that would risk our network, that would risk all of the data that we have, which we're putting there. So we jointly work at solving such problems, and that was just a case in point. But there are many others like that, right? I mean, we work with large ETL providers. We work with, some of the, like for instance, when we launched the digital bank in the UK, the partners that we have in the region that we picked up, right? So for everything, it is many, many partners and ecosystem. It's not us alone. I mean, we have HashiCorp that we work with. So there are many, many such partners, and each of the segments that we have as we work through solutions. So it is an ecosystem of sorts in everything. And you have that in every region that we operate, because There could sometimes be very country-specific solutions as well, right? What's in North America is not something in India or not something in other parts of Asia or in Europe. So you're really talking about more local collaborations that you have as well as you're rolling out solutions. So it's a large ecosystem that we work in.
Fantastic, fantastic. The next question, ma'am, is of a common concern from the standpoint of a user, of a customer, and the general public. So the question is, how safe is this data and encryption level implemented while going through the digital transformation?
Oh, we are paranoid about that, right? So if you look at risk and control, that's one of the biggest investments that we make. And for any solution that you roll out, there are multiple levels of checks and balances that we have before we can roll out solutions. And that's where I talked about when we put something on public cloud or wherever, we're not just looking at first-party risk or second-party risk. We're actually looking at third, fourth, and fifth-party risk in terms of the sort of hops that the data is making, right? So for instance, if you have around Christmas time or around any festival time, there is a discount offered, right? And you just very simplistically go and click on that to get that offer, and you don't know where that hop is going. Very paranoid about working on all of those aspects too before any solution is rolled out. And that's the reason I was talking about, time to market being important. For us, it takes a lot of time to get to that point. And that's where you get delayed because there's so many checks and balances before you can roll out something. But we do, take utmost care of how that is doing, how that happens. There is a lot of effort that we spend on risk modeling. We kind of work out, or it's very much like, you must have had during wartime, right? There is a threat parameter that gets worked out. So we do very much the same things around our network as well, especially to see how we're managing all these data hubs and things like that. And in fact, I mean, that is a great question from that standpoint. We actually had, the guy who pulled out Saddam Hussein, a gentleman called General Odierno. He basically heads our committee on the threat. And there is another a very senior general who was in Afghanistan who's also part of the General McChrystal, who's part of our the threat modeling teams and things like that. So we actually bring them in because you and I are not able to think like somebody who's really a threat to the network. So we really bring these guys in who help us understand threat levels and things like that. So there's a lot that we invest in, spend on that segment and sector, and it takes a lot of time. We don't very easily bring people into our sandbox, and from sandbox to actually rolling out a solution with a third party. It takes a long time. Sometimes there's a lot of angst and frustration on all sides. but when you're dealing with public finance, it takes that much time to kind of ensure you have your threats counted well.
Fantastic, ma'am. I think it is reassuring on two counts. One is the fact that people like you and the example that you were given about who work on the national security defense systems and system integration out there. And then they're also working on the production of private funds. I think it is quite reassuring from a common man standpoint. And the perception is always there, the paranoia is always there about the safety levels. I think that's a very good point.
That's the reason, these large entities cannot push solutions like an Amazon or like a Facebook or somebody, because, they're probably doling out things way faster than we are. You have 20 other parameters that you need to look at before you can roll out something.
Very interesting. Ma'am, we move to another world. Of course, this is very much in the world of finance that we are talking about. What are your views on the future of cryptocurrency?
Well, I mean, those of you that have heard Jamie Dimon, he was extremely against cryptocurrencies at some point in time. But today, I think, our view on crypto has changed. In fact, JP Morgan's created what's called a JPM coin, which is basically a permission shared ledger. And it is part of a larger program called Onyx. And this JP Morgan coin is, we're really committed to innovation, as I said, right, within the financial space. And it helps solve some of the hurdles of basically traditional cross-border payments, etc. So yes, we are investing, big in the JP coin at this point in time. But for cryptocurrency to be a success, there has to be a lot of regulation, right? I mean, we can always say, can they do away with banks and things like that? But I think there has to be a lot more regulation. It has to be a highly, highly regulated environment for these to become successful. We've made our investments, we're doing our pilots and things like that, but I don't think we're there yet.
Okay. Right, very interesting. Thank you, ma'am. And I'll just touch upon one more word and then hand it over to Professor Prasad. The rural cooperatives in India, for example, how can these be brought onto a single digital or financial platform? Any views on that, ma'am?
So, well, I think, one of the things that I've worked on in the past was the whole Aadhaar-based payments that we have, right? So making that a lot more all-pervasive. And I think with UPI and BHIM, India is probably one of the countries that is way ahead of the rest of the world in terms of, how we defined these interfaces. And with Aadhaar, it's really the only place where you have this biometric identity, right? So I think we have all the guardrails. It's really about using some of the networks, I think, that guys like ourselves or some of the, other banks in India or wherever have to use those and bring a lot more onto the digital channels. But I think we are way ahead of the rest of the world in terms of definition of these interfaces and with the biometric identification that we have. In fact, the only other country that I see is Nigeria, I think, which has what's called the Huduma card, which they use for public distribution systems, right? And it's very similar to the Aadhaar, but in terms of identifying the person and then ensuring that the right individuals get the supplies and so on. So I think, we have it all and we should be able to use some of the, partnership. We should do this in partnership with a couple of the, banks and other financial institutions that we have within the country to ensure tier 2 and tier 3 sectors come onto the network.
Fantastic. Partnerships is a solution, and there is an existing network, and we need to be resourceful to identify that for our rural cooperatives. And the edge that India has with BHIM and Aadhaar is something unparalleled. On that very happy note, I'll hand it over to Professor Prasad for the next cluster of questions. We are inching towards 8:30. Professor Prasad.
Ma'am, we are now, seeing new kinds of crisis. So you've got Ukraine, Russia, and then you've got, the blocks which have come in, which have, suddenly changed the dynamics of how finance flows. So you hear about MasterCard not being able to operate there. So there are challenges as well as opportunities. The challenges for certain kinds of players and opportunities for certain kind of players. This is one dimension. The other dimension is, the focus on algo trading, the Himalayan scam in NSE, and what kind of regulation can be expected so that, in a country like India, so that these kind of things don't happen. So if you put this together and you need to look at, what kind of opportunities and challenges exist for the financial markets and the players, can you throw some insights on that?
Actually, I have my own personal take on some of these things, Well, you touched on multiple things. As far as scenarios like war and, things like that are concerned, and can they affect a network? No, not really. But I think with sanctions and whatever governments impose, you need to ensure that others in the chain are not impacted. And how can you have? And that's where all your resiliency patterns, et cetera, that I talked about, we should work on to see, if this happens, then is there an alternative path that, others en route are not impacted? But there was one aspect. Can you go back to the second part of the question that you talked about?
It is from a regulatory point of view, from an
Yeah,
Indian
yeah.
context. Yeah.
Yeah. So we talk about, each one of us talks about the sort of issues that there can be on a network. There is the dark web, and there are multiple things that are happening there, right? The fraudsters, there are data breaches that are happening, and so on. I don't know how many in this room today have a password of their name and 123, right? It's on us, I think, and we have no excuses when we do things like that, where somebody can just breach that particular password extremely easily, because we are very complacent on, I mean, when I say we, some of us are very complacent on those key aspects where somebody can just get into a network because of breaking a very, very simple password. So I don't hold the responsibility on just the regulators. No matter how much regulation somebody brings in, there are these, the vulnerabilities in the network that are self-created as well by a few of us. It could be internal employees, it could be, users that create those vulnerabilities. So I think it's a joint responsibility. It's not any one entity can't help that.
Thank you, ma'am. I think I hand it back to Professor Rao.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Ma'am, I have two simple questions when we wrap it up. The first one is, what is your suggestion to higher education institutions on what kind of value addition courses are required in finance, incorporating new technology, so that we have the right kind of manpower, women power getting into this financial world?
Well, I think, one of the things that we need to have in India are very, very close tie-ups with industry. And I don't see that happening too much, because you need to get the right sort of problem statements that folks should work on, right? So I think that academia-industrial relationship should be very, very strong in terms of, people working on the right sort of problem statements for the industry. And as I said, clear use cases on, all the sectors. I think I talked about some of the megatrends. I also talked about some of the technology areas. I think it's also important to do these, to set up these innovation hubs or whatever, and give them real life problems that the industry wants, and then open it up for the industry to come and see and maybe help enhance some of these things, right? In terms of technology spaces, I think big data is going to be big. AI is another very big space. Metaverse now, with all the sorts of use cases that could be big. And of course, blockchain continues to be an area of investment. Digital banks, our neobanks are what are coming in. So any problem solution around those could be extremely interesting for us to look at and collaborate. And I think when people come out of the academic institution, they should really be ready for the market, which means that they have worked on or at least seen such, problems in the school. So that's where I say it's very important for schools to work very closely with the industry, so that you're able to pick up the right problem statements and have students work on that. Otherwise, they kind of are in a utopian world in college, and then they come out and then they see that the real world is very, very different, and what they need to work on is very different. And what they probably need to unlearn a lot of stuff and relearn and things like that, right? So I think it might, help reduce that angst a bit for students.
Thank you, ma'am. I think the lesson or the suggestion to the academic institutions is to partner with the industry, work very closely.
I see that in the US schools, a lot in the US schools, because a prof has to generate his own fund. So he goes to the industry and he's trying to get problem statements and work on problem statements with the industry, and the industry funds some of that, right? But in India, I think the UGC grants, I don't know. I don't see that collaboration as much as it is in the other places. So I think we should be, maniacal about that collaboration, because it really, really helps students, I think.
Fantastic, right definition. We should be maniacal about that collaboration, and that kind of appetite is required for us to get going. Thank you, ma'am. One question from the theater of war that we are in currently. Ma'am, is there any impact of removal of Russia from SWIFT platform holding any ramifications for JP Morgan Chase?
Well, let's see. I think it's a lot under discussion and debate at this point in time. But yeah, that's a decision that we've taken, and I think we'll stand by it.
Fantastic. I think this session has been extremely fast-paced. I'm not merely talking about the pace of your talking, ma'am. Of course, you talk very fast, you think very fast, that I can make out. The other thing is that we were strictly going by governing the time, and I hope we will now close. We are about 8:33. I'll just take a minute and a half and wrap it up. I think it is extremely difficult also to wrap it up. What we'll do is we will post the recording on our archives. We will do the summary notes and post the same on the archives, and then we'll share it with all the participants. But the lessons that we have learned are far more interesting. And as I said in the beginning, this is something that is just not enough for a 60-minute kind of a session. It's a huge topic, and the kind of speaker that we have got, luckily, is capable of taking many more hours. But ma'am, we go by your diktat of 1 hour. Thank you so much on that. I from the bottom of my heart, from the entire leadership team at ICFAI, we are grateful to you for doing this session. We have really enjoyed. The digital disruption is ranging from mobile and online banking services to digital payments and integration with e-commerce platforms to smarter insights around customer spending and beyond. This evolving landscape of the financial world is calling for new capabilities, improved services, and digitally enabled customer experience. As we understand, apparently, the trends that are going to have major impact on business are digitization of customer service, remote work arrangements, customer demand for e-commerce, creative use of self-service, contactless delivery options, outsourced IT, so on and so forth. The key capabilities that determine the success are cloud-based collaboration platforms, customer or client analytics, real-time intelligence, data-driven personalization, as you mentioned, marketing automation, conversational AI, chatbots, ability to capture user information online, automated cost estimates, so on and so forth. Ma'am, in this context, we probably have missed out one point raising, that is the success of any organizations in its digital journey, digital strategy implementation actually starts with its people. So it is important to evaluate the workforce and set it up for success. So what are the steps taken to encourage employee adoption and also create that buy-in for digital initiatives? Probably that is another important important step that we are not talked about. Of course, we talked about the challenges that the financial world faces in terms of the regulation on one hand, and on the other hand, the cyber threats, and therefore the increased risk management and the modeling that they have adopted, and the strategies to harness these digital solutions beyond all these challenges so as to enable revenue generation, cost optimization, and also parallelly reducing the risk. These are some of the takeaways that we have from this wonderful session. And I was actually in the first round stuck up at the data that you are given, that this world manages, I mean, your own example that you cited is 450 petabytes. 1 petabyte is actually, 1,000 terabytes or roughly equal to 10 to the power 15 bytes. So I think that's a huge thing. And for common man's understanding, you have mentioned that to make this digital transformation a real-time, smooth, seamless experience at the back end, so much of data is actually being transacted and maintained. It is as big as making 65 trips from and to the moon. So for wonderful, huge world and lots of transformation happening. And every day there are learnings and there is a mad pace to catch up. And there is strategy in all these things, and leaders like you spearheading some of these initiatives in India and abroad, and making that difference to all the stakeholders like me and many others who have participated today, and also those who have not participated. Thank you very much, ma'am. I want to once again thank you. In fact, I can't thank you enough for doing this session. Wonderful, enjoyed a lot. We'll get back to you. I'll share you the copy of summary and also the recording of the session and request for your remarks in addition to that as well, so that we'll incorporate and then publish with your permission.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, on behalf of Professor Prasad and everyone here, once again, thank you very much. And your valuable time and expertise has been a great takeaway for us. Thank you.